see it's all in Pennsylvania Dutch. Keith, you were talking about the person who infiltrated the Groundhog lodges, and here she is, right here. She was sent by the morning call. You know, this all men's thing, it's tradition, you know, but they're also, I don't know that they take it all that seriously. A lot of this kind of humor, that says me and Penn State are #1. I think this was the year Penn State had a really good football team. Does anybody know? I don't have the date there, but I think this was 1987, where they have a big football team. Actually, oftentimes current events make their way into the Groundhog Lodge, and there's oftentimes a nice play between past and present. And this is actually women's liberation. This was taken in the early 1970s. And what you have is a group of women coming and demanding their rights. The first sign says, "Out with Oplinger." He was the hot man or the big boss. Let's get rid of him. And in the back, I don't know if you've seen Al Deitch. We also are Pennsylvania German. That's a woman carrying a sign. Actually, this was all the wives of the board members. This was all staged. It wasn't a real protest. This was part of the humor. Oftentimes, the humorous themes play against contemporary events, modern events. And I have to tell my students, there was an oil crisis. There were problems with the Middle East before now. This is from, if any of you remember, the oil crisis, I think of the late 1970s. Remember gas lines? I certainly do. And here they are making fun of a rich sheik who's coming by with lots of money, and he's going to throw it on all the Groundhog Lodge members. Groundhog runs for president, and you can see 1976. All men, so what you have is a situation where if you have a skit that involves women, what you have are men dressed up in drag. And there's a guy, William Fetterman, who has looked at Pennsylvania German plays, and he makes a point. This is oftentimes a common kind of role device in Pennsylvania German plays. And he says, actually, it adds to the humor. What you have is a guy trying to act like a woman, and it actually adds to the humor of the situation. This is a skit I followed through. Somebody was asking me before the show about the skits. Here's a man making sauerkraut, and he's making pork and sauerkraut, and he's going to eat a lot of it, and then he has to run to the outhouse, which was traditional back in those days, and I guess he has a lot of gas, and then somebody comes along and lights a pipe near him, and there's a big explosion, and you can see there he comes out charred. This kind of, I don't know, earthy, down-home, slapstick humor, this is oftentimes part of the Groundhog Lodges. Though oftentimes in the talk there's also a theme as well, and oftentimes there's a play between the past, may seem, you know, less sophisticated and silly, but the present can be pretty crazy too. I have here some of the program covers, and this one doesn't do it, but usually, I guess this does. Usually the program cover has a theme to it. It's winter and summer, and so you'll see some scene from winter, some scene from summer. The other thing I want you to think about is oftentimes there's a theme playing upon past and present, that there's something about the past going on, but also something about the present. Groundhog's involved in airplanes, and I think one has snow on it and the other doesn't. So he's wondering, is it going to be winter or summer? Here again, we have the winter scene and the summer scene, and Groundhog flying over it. This is one of my favorite. Groundhog's cooking an old, or Mrs. Groundhog's cooking an old traditional Pennsylvania German food over a fireplace. But look in the background, and what you see is the emphasis upon modern. And one thing that strikes me about a lot of the ritual in the Groundhog Lodges is humorously it plays off the past and the present. It doesn't always, you know, talk about the past as being good or great, the present as necessarily being bad, but oftentimes there's this kind of dialogue between the past and present. And Groundhog makes it to the moon. So oftentimes current events are incorporated into this. Groundhog makes it to a summit meeting, and the Eagles are, you know, I guess with summer, and the Bears are with winter. And Groundhog also has some questions. This is, who is this young girl, Monica? Groundhog's wondering about our president and his domestic interests. Okay, well, that really does it for the slides that I have. I just want to finish up just a couple comments and then pass it over to Tracy. I want you to think about the fact that in the Groundhog Lodges, you take something that was created in the past, but now it becomes something which is traditional. And the Groundhog Lodges were founded in 1934. One of the things Troxel wanted to do, he felt Pennsylvania German culture was going to disappear, and he wanted a way to kind of at least celebrate it before it went. And that was what, 75 years ago, 76 years ago? So it's still going pretty strong. And if we go back and look at Pennsylvania Germans, what we see is culture is, in a sense, created, tradition is created. There are things that they're doing now that they did not do in 1900, things they did in 1900 that they didn't do in 1800. They're constantly, and I think all cultures do this, they're constantly creating new kinds of traditions, new ways of doing things. I think the other thing to understand about the Groundhog Lodges is roots in American culture and a kind of perspective of a common, ordinary person. To me, what better image of a common, ordinary person than the groundhog? And yet that's the person who has the intelligence to be able to predict the weather, something nobody else can do. This is an American theme that the Pennsylvania Germans have picked up in lots of different respects. And I guess I think, you know, Pennsylvania Germans really should be admired for the way in which they have created this kind of tradition and the enthusiasm and the effort that this tradition brings. And certainly I've been privileged to be able to learn about it, and I feel very good about that. Okay, Tracy.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. And I'm wondering, since you mentioned the future, you talked earlier about how some parents have been reluctant to speak and to teach the Pennsylvania German language, and yet is that not a necessity in terms of preserving the tradition, preserving the culture? What's being done these days to make sure that the Groundhog Lodges continue, that Pennsylvania German culture is continuing to be preserved?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, Tracy, maybe some other people want to speak to this. I think, you know, to a large extent amongst the church people, those liberal people I've talked about, the language is being lost. And I think it goes back really a longer time. It's rare to find anybody younger than 60 years old fluent in the Pennsylvania German language amongst the church groups. Now, it is being preserved amongst the Amish and the Old Order Mennonites. They still speak it at home, but the liberal groups who participate in this, probably almost everybody in this room, it's becoming rarer and rarer. What will happen in the future? You know, you never know. There were Gaelic in Ireland had very few speakers. There was a national effort to revive Gaelic, and I think it's successful. So sometimes languages come back. You know, put a plug in for my own organization. Kutztown University does teach Pennsylvania German language classes. We have a minor. I'm told Ron Treichler actually teaches courses out of here at the Schwenkfelder Museum. So there are different language classes around. But I got to tell you, I don't think there are going to be as many speakers in 30 years as there was today. There isn't as many speakers today as there was 30 years ago.
Okay. Well, we've got Dave Luz with us. He is our host here at the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center. And Dave, your question or comment for Bill?
Well, it's really just a comment, and came to mind when you asked about children and grandchildren involved. On Thursday evening, the Grundsau Lodge number 7 just met here in East Greenville, and a friend of mine was there who is a couple of years younger than me, and he attends and has been attending regularly because his father attends. And I asked him, does he speak the language? No, he doesn't understand anything that goes on at the lodge meetings, but he goes because his father goes. I said, well, what happens when your father isn't around? Are you going to go? Oh, no, that's it. So
wow.
I'm afraid that's probably typical of what will be going on.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, if I just comment on that issue, you know, it depends what happens. You know, one thing that people have been talking about is greater injection of English into the Groundhog Lodge meetings. And I know a couple people that say they have been, Leroy Brown and Bill Meck, they've been going around to different Groundhog Lodges where they do a presentation in Pennsylvania German and then translate into English. This is one possible avenue for things to go, a kind of bilingual program. I have to tell you, some people seem enthusiastic about it. Some of the, you know, older Dutchy people think this isn't, you know, that once the language goes, then the lodges go as well.
Well, Bill, before we wrap up our program, any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, actually I knew you were going to ask this, and so I was trying to think what would my final thoughts be, and I just have two. One is, I don't know what to do with this. I just want to throw this out to you. When I was doing research about the Pennsylvania German Groundhog Lodges, what I did is I went to the library and read all the Allentown morning calls from 1934 up until the present. And they have oftentimes big spreads about the Groundhog Lodges. You can see a lot of pictures. And one thing that struck me is the Groundhog Lodges go on, and there's a depression when they start. And then there's World War II, and then there's a Korean War, and there's a Vietnam War. and we have terrorism. And I think of all these world events, and yet every year you have this page where people just enjoy being Pennsylvania German. And Pennsylvania Germans were involved in these world events. They fought, many of the people in these, leaders in these Groundhog Lodges fought, in all these wars. They suffered through the Depressions. They lived modern American life. But somehow they also preserved this one piece of tradition through all those years. And I think, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but I think there's a story there. The other thing I think I want to finish with is, one thing about Pennsylvania Germans is they have found a way to be both American and Pennsylvania German, to create a tradition, an identity which is unique and special to themselves, but also, this is also a very American ethnic identity. And I think maybe doesn't have to be the only model, but maybe this is a model for other ethnic groups, for other people to appreciate in terms of the Pennsylvania German experience. And of all the things they did, maybe this is one of their greatest contributions to our culture.
Well, Bill Donner, you have given us a fascinating presentation. I want to invite our audience to join me as we thank Bill for sharing such great information with us. And also, we want to thank our wonderful host, the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center in Pennsburg, Pennsylvania, and of course our partner, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. Make sure that you continue to tune into PCN to watch all of our great shows. And if you'd like more information on the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, just go on the web to pahumanities.org. You'll find information on the speakers, the shows, and our speakers, of course, are speaking in every county in Pennsylvania for free. So there's more information about that on the web. Thank you again so much for joining us. I'm Tracy Matisak. We'll see you next time.